They came on a Tuesday. The skies darkened over every major city on Earth as massive ships blocked out the sun. For 72 hours, they hung there, silent, watching. Then the broadcasts began. Tom Miller sat in his worn leather armchair, the same one he'd occupied every evening for the past 15 years since retirement. At 78, his joints ached with the promise of rain, and his eyes weren't what they used to be, but the enormous alien face that appeared on his television came through crystal clear. "People of Earth," the creature said, its voice oddly melodic despite coming from a mouth that resembled an octopus more than anything human. "We are the Galactic Coalition, and we have come to deliver a simple message: your planet now belongs to us." Tom's weathered hands gripped the armrests. He'd heard ultimatums before, back in his military days. Different voices, different wars, but always the same arrogance. "Humanity has been assessed and found lacking," the alien continued. "Your species is violent, unpredictable, and dangerously primitive. For the safety of this sector, we require your immediate surrender and integration. Your resources will be harvested. Your populations will be relocated to appropriate labor facilities." The creature's many eyes blinked in what might have been an attempt at reassurance. "This is not negotiable. You have 48 hours to disband your governments and present your world leaders for processing. Resistance is—" It paused, as if searching for the right word, "inadvisable." Then the screen went black, only to be replaced by panicked newscasters and scenes of chaos from around the world. Tom's neighbor burst through his front door without knocking. "Did you see that? What are we going to do?" Dave was younger, only in his 60s, but fear had aged him a decade in minutes. Tom slowly pushed himself to his feet, his back straightening with a determination he hadn't felt in years. "What are we going to do?" he repeated softly. "The same thing humans have always done when faced with bullies. We say no." "But they're aliens!" Dave exclaimed. "With technology beyond anything we can imagine." Tom walked to his bookshelf and pulled down an old photo album. He opened it to a yellowed photograph of young men in uniform, their faces smeared with dirt but wearing expressions of fierce pride. "Let me tell you something about these aliens that they don't understand," Tom said. "We're stubborn as hell. Back in '88, our squad was pinned down behind enemy lines. Outnumbered 20-1, outgunned, no hope of rescue. The enemy commander offered us surrender terms." He tapped one of the faces in the photo. "Johnny here responded by shooting the white flag they sent over." Dave slumped onto the couch. "This isn't some guerrilla war, Tom. These are beings from another world." "Doesn't matter where they're from," Tom replied. "The principles are the same. Throughout history, every empire that's encountered humans has made the same mistake. They look at our technology, our divisions, our apparent weaknesses, and they think we'll be easy to conquer." A grim smile crossed his face. "They never account for our sheer bloody-mindedness." Outside, sirens wailed. Down the street, the Wilsons were throwing suitcases into their car, presumably heading for the countryside. On the television, a general was urging calm while politicians argued about surrender terms. Tom changed the channel until he found what he was looking for, not more news, but history. A documentary about human resistance movements throughout the ages. Ordinary people standing against overwhelming odds. "What these aliens don't understand is that humans don't just fight when we can win," Tom said, nodding toward the screen where French resistance fighters were smuggling children to safety. "We fight when we must. When it's the right thing to do, regardless of the odds." Dave watched the images flicker across the screen. "You really think we have a chance?" "I think these aliens have made a critical error in judgment," Tom replied. "They've studied us as a resource to be harvested. They haven't studied us as warriors." He pointed at the sky visible through his window, where the alien ship loomed like a storm cloud. "They've never fought humans before. And I guarantee you, they've never encountered anything like us. For the first time since the broadcast, Dave's breathing steadied. So what do we do? Tom reached for his phone. First, we call everyone we know. Then we remind them what humans do best. His eyes, faded with age but bright with purpose, met Dave's. We defy. By morning, Tom's living room had become an unlikely war room. A dozen neighbors crowded around his small television, watching as world leaders debated the alien ultimatum. The oldest person there was Tom himself, and his calm demeanor had a steadying effect on the others. "They're going to surrender," muttered Bill from down the street, pointing at the screen where diplomats were arguing. "Look at them, already fighting over which countries get the best deal." "Maybe at the top," Tom said. "But that's not where real resistance begins. Never has been." The news shifted to coverage of the alien ships. A reporter was explaining what little they knew about the Galactic Coalition. Intelligence agencies believe there are at least 7 different species in the coalition. This marks humanity's first confirmed contact with extraterrestrial life. Tom leaned forward. 7 species working together. That tells us something important. "What's that?" asked Helen, a retired schoolteacher who lived across the road. "They need each other," Tom said simply. "Empires don't form partnerships unless they have to." The broadcast cut to an interview with a scientist who had been studying the ships. "Their technology is remarkable," the scientist explained. "The energy readings we're getting suggest propulsion systems centuries beyond our own capabilities. Their ships appear to manipulate gravity itself." "Of course they're advanced," Dave said, despair creeping back into his voice. "We're probably like cavemen to them." Tom shook his head. Technology isn't everything. Throughout history, technologically superior forces have been defeated by determined locals who understood the terrain and refused to play by the expected rules. On the television, the alien spokesperson appeared again. The creature's multiple eyes blinked in sequence as it addressed Earth. "We observe your cities emptying. This is wise. Rural areas will be processed last. However, we have noted concerning communications from your military installations. Let us be clear, your weapons cannot harm our vessels. Your nuclear arsenals have been neutralized. Your resistance would only result in unnecessary suffering." The alien's tentacled mouth twisted in what might have been meant as a smile. "We are not cruel. Compliance will be rewarded. Those who serve well may earn citizenship within the coalition after sufficient generations of loyalty." Tom muted the television. "Notice what they're doing? They're trying to divide us. Offering rewards for compliance, threatening punishment for resistance. Standard tactics," agreed Frank, who had served in the military decades ago. "Worked on Earth for centuries." "But it doesn't always work," Tom said. "Sometimes the occupier miscalculates." Outside, military vehicles rumbled down the street. A young officer stepped out and approached houses with a stack of papers. When he reached Tom's door, the officer looked uncomfortable. "Sir, these are evacuation orders. The government has agreed to begin a phased surrender. Civilians are being relocated to designated processing centers." Tom took the paper but didn't look at it. "Son, how many of your fellow soldiers are happy about this?" The officer glanced around nervously. "I'm not authorized to discuss military morale, sir." "You don't need to," Tom replied gently. "I can see it in your eyes. You didn't sign up to surrender your planet." "We have our orders," the officer said stiffly. "Orders change," Tom said. "Especially when the chain of command is compromised." After the officer left, the group fell silent. "So what now?" Dave finally asked. "We can't fight ships that can neutralize nuclear weapons." Tom stood up with effort, his old joints protesting. "We don't have to fight their ships. Not directly. These aliens think they understand humans because they've observed us. But they've never experienced us. He pointed to the ceiling, where the massive alien vessel hovered miles above. Up there, they're wondering why Earth hasn't fully surrendered yet. They expected panic, chaos, immediate capitulation. Their historical models told them that's what primitive species do. And what do we do instead? Helen asked. Tom's weathered face broke into a slow grin. We surprise them. From everything we've seen, these aliens expect logic and self-preservation to drive our decisions. They don't understand human defiance. They don't understand that we'll burn our own crops rather than let an invader have them. They don't understand that we'll die on our feet rather than live on our knees. He picked up his phone. I've been making calls all night. Old friends, former soldiers, people who know people. There are resistance cells forming already. Not just here, but everywhere. And they're all asking the same question: what would make aliens who can travel between stars afraid of humans? Tom pointed to the television, where the alien was still speaking silently. Look at them. They have technology we can't match. But they're still afraid of something about us. That's why they're here with an overwhelming show of force. That's why they disabled our weapons first. They fear us. And we need to figure out why. As twilight fell, the news reported scattered conflicts around the world. Despite official surrender orders, military units in several countries had gone rogue, refusing to lay down arms. Civilian protests had erupted in major cities. The aliens had responded with precision strikes, demolishing government buildings in 3 capitals. It's beginning, Tom said quietly. Humanity is saying no. As the dawn of the third day broke, rumors spread faster than the morning light. Government communications had been disrupted overnight, and official channels broadcast only alien messages urging compliance. But through text messages, radio ham operators, and old-fashioned word of mouth, a different story emerged: humans were fighting back. Tom sat at his kitchen table with a map spread before him, making marks with a red pencil. Around him, the neighbors who'd stayed, those who refused evacuation, watched anxiously. Reports from 6 continents now, Tom said, marking another spot. Military units have gone dark, civilians are sabotaging alien landing sites, and underground networks are forming. Just like they always have when faced with occupation. They'll crush us, warned Bill, who hadn't slept since the ultimatum. If they can neutralize nuclear weapons, what chance do we have? They haven't neutralized our minds, Tom replied, tapping his temple. Or our will. That's always been humanity's true weapon. The television flickered with emergency broadcasts. An alien representative appeared, its multiple eyes blinking rapidly in what Tom had begun to recognize as agitation. Unacceptable resistance has been detected in sectors 12, 17, and 23, the creature announced. Coalition forces have eliminated these disruptions. Further resistance will result in environmental penalties. We can make portions of your atmosphere unbreathable. We can raise your oceans. Compliance is not optional. Dave turned to Tom. They're getting desperate with these threats. Exactly, Tom said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. They expected to be running cleanup operations by now, not facing global resistance. Something isn't going according to their plan. A knock at the door brought everyone to attention. Frank peered through the window, then quickly opened it. The young military officer from yesterday slipped inside, now dressed in civilian clothes. Lieutenant, Tom acknowledged. Not anymore, the man said. Military command structure collapsed last night. Some generals surrendered. Others have gone underground. He hesitated. Word got around about what you said yesterday. About resistance. About how they fear us for some reason. Tom nodded. And? There's a colonel who wants to talk to you. She's organizing something big, and when your name came up, well, people remember your strategies from the old conflicts. They say you understand insurgency better than anyone. Tom smiled faintly. Been a long time since anyone wanted my opinion on warfare. Times change, the officer said. When aliens invade. Within hours, Tom found himself in the basement of an abandoned warehouse, surrounded by military personnel, former government officials, and civilian experts. At the center stood Colonel Chen, a woman whose sharp eyes evaluated him immediately. "Mr. Miller," she said. "I've heard you've been thinking about why these aliens fear us. Care to share with the group?" Tom looked around at the expectant faces. They came prepared for total war. They neutralized our biggest weapons before we even knew they were here. That tells me they've studied us extensively and determined we're a threat, not just a resource to be harvested. But why would advanced aliens fear primitive humans? He paused, letting the question hang. I've been studying their communications. They keep calling us unpredictable and dangerously primitive. Those are interesting word choices. Most advanced species would call less developed ones simple or undeveloped. But dangerous implies respect and fear. A scientist stepped forward. We've been analyzing their ships. They're certainly advanced, but their designs show unusual defensive measures. Almost as if they're built to withstand unpredictable attacks rather than conventional warfare. And reports from captured coalition medical facilities suggest they're especially concerned about biological contamination from humans, added a woman in a lab coat. They're taking extreme measures to avoid direct contact with us. Tom nodded slowly. Put it together, and what do you get? They fear our unpredictability, our biology, and our resilience. Throughout Earth's history, invaders have underestimated the sheer stubborn will of occupied peoples. These aliens are making the same mistake, but they know enough to be afraid. So what's your strategy? Colonel Chen asked bluntly. Asymmetric warfare, Tom replied without hesitation. We can't match their technology, but we can make occupation so costly they'll reconsider. We need to be unpredictable, the very thing they fear. Hit and run. Sabotage. Intelligence gathering. And most importantly, we need to understand precisely what about us terrifies them. As the meeting continued into the night, reports flooded in from around the world. Resistance cells had destroyed alien landing pads in South America. Australian outback fighters had captured alien communication equipment. European hackers had broken into alien computer systems, extracting valuable data. They made a critical mistake, Tom told the colonel as dawn approached. They announced their intentions before securing their victory. They gave us time to do what humans do best, adapt and resist. Later, as Tom was finally getting some rest on a cot in the corner, Dave found him. They've put you in charge of tactical planning for the entire Midwest region, Dave said, amazement in his voice. Not bad for a 78-year-old retiree. Tom chuckled wearily. Age brings perspective. I've seen occupation forces come and go. The story always ends the same way when the occupied people refuse to submit. And how's that? Dave asked. Tom's eyes, tired but determined, met his friend's. The occupiers eventually learn that controlling territory is not the same as controlling people. And humans, well, we're the most difficult people in the galaxy to control. As if to punctuate his point, the distant sound of explosions echoed through the night, followed by the crackle of alien energy weapons. The resistance had begun its work. The fourth day of the invasion dawned with an unusual silence. The constant hum of alien ships that had filled the air since their arrival had diminished. Tom stood on the roof of the resistance headquarters, binoculars trained on the massive vessel that hung above the city. They're pulling back, he observed as Colonel Chen joined him. Look there, and there. They're consolidating their forces. Retreating, she asked hopefully. Tom shook his head. Regrouping. They've realized this isn't going to be the quick subjugation they planned. They're adapting their strategy. Below them, the Resistance Command Center buzzed with activity. Intelligence reports streamed in from around the globe. The hackers had made a breakthrough overnight, accessing alien communications. "You need to see this," a young tech expert called out as Tom descended from the roof. She pointed to a screen filled with alien script, now translated to English. "It's an internal message from their command structure." Tom leaned in, his old eyes squinting at the text. Preliminary assessment gravely flawed. Human resistance exceeds all predictive models. Recommendation: immediate deployment of Class 4 suppression measures in all major population centers. Alternative: strategic withdrawal to reassess long-term viability of Earth acquisition. A smile spread across Tom's weathered face. They're considering pulling out completely. But what are these Class 4 measures? Dave asked, the worry evident in his voice. Before anyone could answer, the building shook violently. Outside, the sky had taken on an unnatural purple hue. "They're altering the atmosphere," a scientist shouted, reading from a sensor panel. "Introducing some kind of compound designed to incapacitate humans." Colonel Chen barked orders into her radio. "All units, deploy air filtration. Seal all buildings. Execute Operation Breath." Tom nodded in approval. They had anticipated this move days ago, preparing sealed environments and distributing gas masks to resistance cells. "Their playbook is becoming predictable," Tom said. "They escalate, we adapt, they're surprised by our adaptation, then they escalate again." In the communications room, the screen suddenly filled with a new alien face, different from the spokesperson they'd seen before. This creature had a rigid exoskeleton and eyes that glowed faintly yellow. "Humans," it began, its voice deeper and more authoritative. "This is High Commander Vexorn of the Galactic Coalition. Your resistance has been noted. It appears our initial assessment of your species was incomplete." The alien paused, mandibles clicking. "We estimated a 97.3% probability of immediate surrender based on your fractured global politics and history of internal conflicts. This estimate was incorrect." Tom leaned forward, hanging on every word. "In 4 standard cycles, your unaugmented species has inflicted damage to Coalition resources that exceeds all recorded resistance efforts in our last 17 planetary acquisitions combined. Your biological adaptability, psychological resilience, and tactical unpredictability are concerning." The creature's eyes narrowed. "The Coalition hereby proposes terms for mutual disengagement. We will withdraw our forces from Earth orbit. In exchange, we require assurance that humanity will not pursue interstellar technology for the next 100 of your years." The command center erupted in cheers, but Tom raised a hand for silence. "It's a trap," he said quietly. "They're buying time. If we agree, they'll return in a century with better intelligence and overwhelming force." Colonel Chen nodded grimly. "What do you suggest?" "Counterproposal," Tom said firmly. "We don't just want them to leave. We want protection." Within the hour, Earth's newly formed Unified Response Team, with Tom as a key advisor, sent their message to the Coalition vessels. The response they crafted was bold: Earth would agree not to pursue interstellar travel for 50 years, not 100, and in exchange, the Coalition would declare Earth a protected neutral zone under galactic law. "They fear us," Tom explained to the Leadership Council. "Let's use that fear to secure our future. By the time the agreement expires, we'll be ready for the stars on our own terms." 3 tense hours passed before the alien commander responded. The Coalition accepted the terms with one addition: they would leave monitoring satellites in the outer solar system to ensure compliance. As the alien ships began their departure one by one, Tom sat quietly in a corner of the command center, watching the celebrations around him. Dave found him there, offering a paper cup of coffee. "You did it, old man. You helped save the world." Tom shook his head. "Humanity saved itself. All I did was remind everyone of what we already knew, that humans don't surrender easily." "What happens now?" Dave asked, looking out the window at the thinning alien fleet. "Now," Tom said, "we prepare. We have 50 years to get ready for the galaxy. To build, learn, and unite. Those aliens did us a favor, really." "A favor?" Dave looked incredulous. Tom nodded. "For the first time in history, humanity is truly united. Look around, soldiers from former enemy nations working side by side, scientists sharing discoveries openly, political differences set aside for survival." He smiled. "It took an alien invasion to remind us that we're all human first." 1 week later, as the last alien ship disappeared from Earth's skies, Tom returned to his small house. His armchair waited for him, and for a moment, everything seemed as it had been before they came. But on his wall hung a new photograph, Tom surrounded by military leaders, scientists, and ordinary citizens who had become extraordinary in the face of invasion. Below it sat a framed copy of the Earth Coalition Treaty, bearing his signature among the representatives of humanity. Tom eased himself into his chair with a satisfied sigh. At 78, he had found an unexpected final chapter to his life. As his phone rang with another call from the newly formed Earth Defense Council, he smiled to himself. The aliens had made the oldest mistake in the book, they had underestimated the sheer stubbornness of human defiance. And in doing so, they had inadvertently given humanity its greatest gift, unity in the face of extinction, and a hard-won place among the stars.